walk that shook the NBA. The Knicks finally touched the trophy, but the image everyone kept replaying was not Jalen Brunson smiling under the confetti. It was Victor Wembanyama disappearing into the tunnel. No handshake, no congratulations, no slow walk through the pain. Just one of the most gifted young players basketball has ever seen turning his back on the court while New York celebrated a championship it had waited 53 years to feel again. Inside Frostbank Center, orange and blue confetti started falling like history itself had cracked open. Brunson was surrounded by teammates. Karl Anthony Towns had his arms in the air. Josh Hart, McCall Bridges, and OG Anunoby were swallowed by a celebration that looked bigger than basketball. Thousands of miles away, Times Square was already shaking. Fans were screaming, strangers were hugging, and New York was becoming the loudest city on earth. But Wembanyama was gone. And that single walk changed the entire conversation. Because this was supposed to be about the Knicks ending one of the longest championship droughts in NBA history. It was supposed to be about Brunson dropping 45 points in the biggest game of his life. It was supposed to be about New York finally getting its parade, its moment, its release after generations of heartbreak. Instead, within minutes, the internet froze on one question. Did Wemby just disrespect the champions? The clip spread fast. One camera caught him moving toward the locker room. Another angle showed the Knicks celebrating behind him. Then the reactions came in waves. Fans called it salty. Others said it was just pain. Some defended him as a young superstar who had just lost the most emotional game of his career. But the louder voices saw something different. They saw a player who wanted the crown, lost it, and could not bring himself to honor the team that took it from him. That is why this moment hit so hard. Because in the NBA, greatness is not only measured by points, rebounds, blocks, or highlights. It is measured when the lights are hottest, when the cameras are closest, and when losing hurts so badly that every step you take becomes part of your legacy. So before we break down the tunnel walk, the backlash, Draymond Green's reaction, Chris Broussard's warning, and the real reason this finals loss may turn Wembanyama into something even more dangerous, comment where you are watching from right now. If you think Wemby was wrong for leaving the court, press 1. If you think people are overreacting and he was just crushed by the loss, press 2. And if you follow NBA drama, championship stories, and the moments that change a superstar's image forever, subscribe now, because this story is only getting started. New York's 53-year explosion. For New York, this was never just another championship. This was 53 years of frustration, jokes, heartbreak, false hope, bad seasons, broken promises, and endless debates finally crashing into one perfect night. The Knicks did not simply win a final series. They unlocked something that had been trapped inside the city for generations. When the final buzzer sounded in San Antonio, the trophy was on the floor at Frostbank Center, but the emotional earthquake was already happening back home. Around Madison Square Garden, fans poured into the streets like the city had just been handed back a piece of its identity. In Times Square, people screamed until their voices cracked. Strangers hugged like family. Drivers honked. Blue and orange jerseys were everywhere. For older fans, this was not just a celebration. This was a memory they had waited most of their lives to experience. And that is what made Wembanyama's walk so explosive. Because while New York was having a once-in-a-lifetime moment, the Spurs' young superstar became the one person who looked like he wanted no part of it. The cameras did not just catch a player leaving the court. They caught a contract. On one side, Brunson and the Knicks were standing inside history. On the other side, Wemby was walking away from it. That image felt bigger than a missed handshake. To Knicks fans, it looked personal. It looked like the final insult after a series that had already pushed emotions to the edge. New York had fought through every possession, every late game scare, every Spurs run, and every moment where Wembanyama looked ready to stretch the series back open. So when the Knicks finally closed the door, their fans wanted recognition. They wanted the league to admit that this was not luck. This was not a fluke. This was a team that earned every inch. Jalen Brunson had become the face of the city. Karl Anthony Towns gave them size, spacing, and pressure. Josh Hart brought chaos and heart. McCall Bridges and OG Anunoby gave them defense, toughness, and the kind of calm New York had been missing for decades. Together, they were not just a roster. They were a statement. The Knicks had waited long enough. And on the night they finally got everything, Victor Wembanyama gave the basketball world something else to argue about. Why Wemby's reaction went viral. The reason Wembanyama's reaction went viral so quickly is simple. NBA fans do not only watch games anymore, they watch body language, They watch eye contact. They watch who stays, who leaves, who claps, who refuses to look across the court. In the modern NBA, every second after the buzzer can become evidence. And Wemby gave the internet a perfect clip. He did not throw anything. He did not say anything wild on the floor. He did not create a scene. That was actually what made it more powerful. His silence became the story. His walk became the statement. The tunnel became the headline. Within minutes, people were replaying the same angle over and over. Some fans slowed it down. Others compared it to past finals losses where great players stayed and congratulated their opponents. Then came the split. One side said Wembanyama had shown poor sportsmanship at the worst possible time. The other side said he was a 22-year-old superstar who had just carried a franchise to the finals and watched his dream collapse in front of him. Both sides had a point, and that is why the debate became so loud. Because Wembanyama is not treated like a normal young player. He never has been. From the moment he entered the league, people talked about him like a future face of basketball. His height, skill, timing, and defensive range made him feel almost unreal. Every block looked impossible. Every three-pointer looked unfair. Every step toward greatness felt like the league was being pulled into a new era. But that kind of attention comes with a price. When you are marketed as the future, people expect you to behave like the future. They expect maturity before age, leadership before comfort, grace before experience. And when you fall short in a public moment, the reaction is not normal either. It becomes a national debate. That is what happened here. Wemby was not just judged as a losing player. He was judged as a symbol. Was he ready to become the face of the league? Did he understand the unwritten rules? Could he handle defeat with the same power he showed when he was winning? The Knicks got the trophy, but Wembanyama got the microscope. Draymond, Broussard, and the media firestorm. Once the clip hit social media, the reaction did not stay with fans for long. It moved straight into the NBA media machine, and that is when the story became impossible to escape. Draymond Green was one of the first major voices to put heat on the moment. And when Draymond talks about finals emotion, people listen because he has lived inside that pressure for years. He knows what it feels like to win, to lose, to be loved, to be criticized, and to have one emotional decision follow you for an entire career. His message was not complicated. The Knicks earned that moment. And when a team beats you on the biggest stage, there's a way you are supposed to carry yourself. That hit hard because it was not coming from someone who had never been in the fire. It came from a player who understands how cruel the finals can be. Then Chris Broussard added another layer. His reaction was not just about sportsmanship, it was about public image. He suggested that Wembanyama's approval rating, the almost universal love surrounding him, had taken a hit. That mattered because Wemby had been one of the rare young stars who seemed almost impossible to dislike. He was humble in interviews, brilliant on the court, and different from everyone else. Fans saw him as the next giant of the NBA, not only because of his talent, but because of the way he carried himself. Then one walk changed the tone. Suddenly, the conversation was not just, how great is Wembanyama? It became, is Wembanyama as likable as people thought? That is a dangerous shift for any superstar, especially one still building his identity in the league. And then came the fans. Knicks fans did not hold back. Some mocked him, some called him bitter. Some said the Spurs had talked and carried themselves like they were the better team, only to lose the series in 5 games. Spurs fans pushed back, arguing that Wemby was devastated, not disrespectful. Neutral fans turned it into a debate about NBA culture itself. Should losing players always shake hands? Is walking away a sign of weakness or just a human reaction to pain? The firestorm worked because it touched everything: pride, respect, youth, leadership, and the brutal reality that in the NBA, one moment can reshape how millions of people see you. The dangerous word domination. The tunnel walk was already enough to create controversy, but Wembanyama's post-game comments poured gasoline on the entire situation. Because after losing the finals in 5 games, after watching the Knicks celebrate on his home floor, Wemby sat in front of reporters and used one word that changed the temperature of the room: domination. He said the Spurs had stretches where they absolutely dominated. He talked about the margin of error being thin. He pointed to mistakes, execution problems, and the way small breakdowns were punished. From a basketball standpoint, he was not completely wrong. San Antonio had real control in several stretches of the series. They built leads, they defended, they made New York uncomfortable. They showed, at times, that they could bend the game around Wembanyama's presence. But timing mattered. When you lose a championship series, especially to a team that just waited 53 years for that moment, the word dominated does not land like analysis. It lands like denial. That is why fans reacted so strongly. To Knicks fans, it sounded like Wemby was trying to take something away from their victory. To critics, it sounded like he could not accept the result. To supporters, it sounded like a young competitor trying to explain how close his team really was. But to the internet, nuance rarely survives the first wave. The quote became a weapon. People pulled up the scoreboard. Knicks in 5, Brunson Finals MVP, New York champions, Spurs eliminated. Every response came back to the same argument. If you dominated, why are they holding the trophy? But that is also what made the series so painful for San Antonio. Wembanyama knew how close it had been. He knew the Spurs had led in every game. He knew the difference between extending the series and losing. Everything had come down to a handful of possession. He knew this was not a finals where they had been embarrassed from start to finish. That might be the reason he sounded so frustrated. Losing badly hurts. But losing, when you believe the title was within reach, cuts deeper. It makes every missed shot feel heavier. Every turnover becomes louder. Every late game possession replays in your mind. And for Wembanyama, that pain came out as confidence. Maybe too much confidence at exactly the wrong time. The series that slipped away. To understand why Wembanyama looked so crushed, you have to understand how this series slipped away from San Antonio. This was not a simple 5-game defeat. This was 5 games of hope, pressure, and repeated heartbreak. The Spurs had chances, real chances. In Game 1, they had control late enough to believe they could protect home court. Wembanyama's defense bothered New York. The building was loud. San Antonio looked like it could set the tone for the entire series. Then the Knicks closed like a team that had already survived too many storms to panic. They punched back in the final minutes and stole the opener. Game 2 only made the pressure worse. New York went into San Antonio again and took another one. That is when the mood changed. The Knicks were no longer just dangerous. They were fearless. They had walked into the Spurs building twice and walked out with command of the final. San Antonio responded in Game 3, but even that win did not erase the warning signs. The Spurs could build leads, but they struggled to finish. They could dominate stretches, but they could not keep the Knicks buried. Every time New York looked finished, Brunson found a way to drag them back. Every time the Spurs created separation, Hart, Bridges, Towns, or Anunoby made the small play that kept the Knicks breathing. That became the story of the series. 5 games, 5 leads, 1 win. That line is brutal because it says everything. The Spurs were not talentless. They were not overwhelmed every night. They were not completely outclassed. They were good enough to scare New York, good enough to control quarters, good enough to make the Knicks sweat, but they were not steady enough to close the deal. Game 5 was the final wound. Wembanyama came out locked in defensively. He protected the rim, challenged shots, changed passing angles, and reminded everyone why his ceiling feels almost impossible to measure. But as the game tightened, New York looked more composed. Brunson looked ready for the moment. The Knicks trusted each other. The Spurs began to feel the weight of every mistake. And when the final score settled at 94-90, the box score could not capture the real damage. San Antonio had not just lost the game. They had lost a championship they could almost touch. Brunson took the moment Wemby couldn't own. While the world argued about Wembanyama walking away, Jalen Brunson stood in the middle of the storm and owned the night completely. That is the part Knicks fans will never forget. Brunson did not need to be the tallest player, the flashiest athlete, or the most physically impossible superstar on the floor. He won with patience, footwork, strength, timing, and a level of calm that made the biggest game of his career look like it belonged to him from the opening tip. 45 points in a title-clinching game is not just a stat, it is a legacy stamp. Every time the Spurs threatened to swing the game back, Brunson answered. When San Antonio's defense tried to crowd him, he found space. When Wembanyama's presence changed the paint, Brunson adjusted. When the Knicks needed a bucket to stop the building from exploding, the ball kept finding him, and he kept giving New York exactly what it needed. That is why his Finals MVP felt so powerful. It was not built on one hot shooting night alone. It was built on a whole identity. Brunson became the heartbeat of a team that had spent years trying to find one. He was not loud in the way some stars are loud. He did not need constant attention. His game did the talking, possession after possession, until the entire city had no choice but to follow him. And the contrast with Wembanyama made the story even sharper. Wemby looked like the future. Brunson looked like the present. Wemby had the gifts that make scouts dream. Brunson had the control that wins in the final 2 minutes. Wemby blocked shots that most players would never even reach. Brunson created angles most defenders never saw coming. One player represented what basketball might become. The other proved what championship basketball still demands: experience, composure, trust, decision-making under pressure. That was the difference. Wembanyama may have been the most fascinating player in the series, But Brunson was the most reliable when everything was on the line. And when the Knicks needed someone to turn 53 years of waiting into one final victory, Brunson did not disappear into the pressure. He walked straight into it and took the trophy with him. New York turned victory into a citywide earthquake. Once the Knicks won, New York did what New York does. It made the moment feel bigger than the sport itself. The celebration did not stay inside the arena. It did not even stay inside basketball. It spread across the city like a wave. Madison Square Garden became a gathering point. Times Square became a sea of orange and blue. Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan, Staten Island, everywhere. The same release could be felt. People who had never seen the Knicks win a championship in their lifetime were suddenly living inside a story their parents and grandparents had told them about for decades. That kind of waiting changes the way a city celebrates. This was not a casual fan base enjoying a good season. This was New York finally exhaling after years of being laughed at, doubted, and reminded of what the franchise used to be. Every chant carried history. Every jersey meant something. Every old highlight of the 1970s suddenly felt connected to the present again. Then came the parade. A ticker tape parade for the Knicks felt almost unreal. The Canyon of Heroes, usually reserved for the kind of triumphs that become part of the city's memory, turned into a moving tribute to a team that had brought pride back to New York basketball. Blue and orange covered the streets. Fans leaned from windows. Players waved from floats. The city did not just celebrate a team. It celebrated survival. Patrick Ewing being there mattered. Walt Frazier being there mattered. Spike Lee soaking in the moment mattered. These were not random appearances. They were living symbols of everything the Knicks had been through. The near misses, the loyal years, the eras that almost delivered but never quite finished the job. And now, this team had finished it. That is why the emotional weight was so heavy. The Knicks were not just champions because they won 4 games in a final series. They were champions because they carried an entire basketball culture across the finish line. But even during the parade, even with Brunson holding the MVP trophy and the city chanting his name, Wembanyama's shadow stayed attached to the story. The tunnel walk became the other image of the finals. New York had its celebration. Wemby had his lesson. And the NBA had a rivalry that suddenly felt personal. Wembanyama's pain might become his weapon. It is easy to criticize Wembanyama for walking off the court. It is easy to say he should have stayed, shook hands, and honored the champions. And honestly, that criticism is not unfair. Great players are expected to show respect even when the moment hurts. But there is another side to this. Wembanyama is 22 years old. He just carried the Spurs to their first finals appearance in years. He faced the full weight of playoff basketball. The physicality, the scouting, the pressure, the nonstop attention, and the emotional exhaustion that comes with being treated like the future of the league before you have even fully grown into yourself as a leader. That does not excuse everything, but it explains why this moment matters. Some players are shaped by the night they win, others are shaped by the night they lose and have nowhere to hide. This may be that night for Wemby, because now he knows. He knows talent can put you in the finals, but execution wins it. He knows a 12-point lead means nothing if your team cannot close. He knows the world will not give him space to process pain quietly. He knows every gesture will be studied, every quote will be clipped, and every mistake will become part of the debate over who he really is. That is a hard lesson, but it is also a valuable one. The scary part for the rest of the NBA is that Wembanyama does not seem like a player who forgets pain. He seems like a player who stores it. The Olympic loss with France, the finals loss with San Antonio, the confetti falling for another team, the criticism, the questions about his maturity, the viral clips, the jokes, the doubts. All of it can become fuel. And that is why this story may look very different years from now. Today, people see the tunnel walk and talk about disrespect. But one day, if Wembanyama comes back stronger, more composed, more ruthless in late game moments, people may look back at this finals loss as the night he truly started becoming what everyone feared he could become. Not just a highlight machine, not just a generational prospect. A superstar who learned the cost of being unfinished, the lesson behind the tunnel. The real lesson behind Wembanyama's tunnel walk is not that he is a bad teammate, a bad person, or a player who cannot become a champion. That would be too simple. And the truth is usually more complicated than the loudest reaction online. The lesson is that the NBA does not only test talent, it tests emotional control. It tests leadership when the scoreboard turns against you. It tests whether a superstar can stand in pain without letting that pain define the entire picture. Wembanyama failed part of that test in front of the world. But failure at 22 is not the end of a story. For many great players, it is the beginning of the most important chapter. Strategically, the Spurs also learned something brutal. They are close, but close is not enough. They had leads, they had defensive stretches where New York looked uncomfortable. They had the most unique young big man in basketball, but they did not have the late game discipline to close a championship series. That means San Antonio's next step is not just adding talent, it is building habits. Better shot selection, stronger fourth quarter execution, more reliable half-court offense, more veterans who can calm the game when the pressure gets too loud. For the Knicks, the lesson is different. They proved that trust can beat hype. Brunson, Towns, Hart, Bridges, and Anunoby were not just 5 names on a lineup card. They were a connected group that understood roles, pressure, and sacrifice. New York won because its stars accepted the moment instead of fighting against it. And for fans, maybe the most human lesson is this: sports can make people emotional because it reflects real life. Winning with grace matters, losing with grace matters too. But growing after a painful mistake may matter most of all. Wembanyama will get another chance, maybe many chances. The next time he stands on a finals floor, everyone will remember the tunnel. The question is whether he will. If you think this loss will make Wembanyama more dangerous, comment 1. If you think the Knicks exposed something real about the Spurs, comment 2. If you believe Jalen Brunson deserves more respect after this championship run, comment 3. And if you want more NBA stories, drama breakdowns, player reactions, trade rumors, and the moments that shape the future of the league, hit subscribe, like this video, and share it with another NBA fan. Because the Knicks got their championship, but Wembanyama's story is far from over.